asked. Um, I'm a freshman legislator.
2 months,
and,
you're brand new.
My first vote was to impeach the governor. My 17-year-old daughter said, "Dad, if you retire now, you'll have the greatest voting record in Illinois history." This was left at his footsteps. There's no question. He is there. He is engaged. And we have a couple of months now to sit down in a bipartisan way. Will and I are working on procurement reform measures together, charter school reform measures together. So I think this is an opportunity. I mean, there's no time better than the present to make real reform in Illinois.
And the hole is so big. I mean, you know.
Is it? And how do we know how big the hole is, truthfully? Because as I understand it, and you guys know this in Springfield far better than I, you'll never reconcile that book in next year or the year after to really know. That number's tossed out there like it's a real thing, but it isn't, is it?
Well, I think it is a real thing. You can look at how much money you've collected, you can look at what the budget you passed in last year and see where you are in terms of revenue versus what you're budgeted to spend and see where you are. And we know that there's a lot of outstanding liabilities in terms of our pension funding. We're behind on that. We're behind. We've underfunded our schools for years, and you can include that as part of the liabilities as well. But my point is that, you know, Governor Quinn, to his credit, has been far more open about the state's financial situation than the previous governor. And I think that pointing out all of the areas where we have these challenges creates a groundwork for us to really roll up our sleeves as Democrats and Republicans, Chicagoans and downstate or suburbanites to find a solution together.
There's no doubt that for the last 6 years, we've been dealing with voodoo economics and budgetary gimmicks in the state of Illinois. Governor Blagojevich and his team weren't straight up with the people. They weren't straight up with the General Assembly. There was no working relationship. Governor Quinn, you know, we're going to rally behind him. Republicans and Democrats are working alongside with him to give him the benefit of the doubt. Is this the right solution? It's a great idea. But so did Governor Ogilvie. He had a great idea, but he didn't get reelected. And the difference now is that we are suffering the worst economic downturn in the history of Illinois. Today, we must focus on putting real people, working families, seniors back to work and deal with the budget crisis on an incremental basis.
But here's the thing. The next election's in 11 months. And while we talk about pensions are unfunded, well, I was the legislature deciding to defer pensions, right, and their voodoo economics. So the legislature helped with an awful lot of that, too. Now you got an election hovering over us in 11 months. Do we abandon our cynicism and believe that Republicans don't see this as a wedge issue, and Democrats might have a better candidate in their view than Quinn, which might be Speaker Madigan's daughter? And so isn't this potentially likely to be completely politicized?
There's obviously the potential for it to be politicized, but if you look at the fact that we have an economy that's suffering. We've got people who right now who are depending on the state through TANF programs, temporary aid to needy families, Medicaid providers who haven't been paid for months. We're borrowing from Medicaid providers in order to provide Medicaid services. We've got a lot of problems that we've got to fix right now that are a lot bigger than whether I get reelected or Michael Connolly gets reelected or who gets to sit in the big chair in 2011.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, in watching the legislature over a few years, sometimes those bigger problems get gobbled up by
But if it can ever get done, Carol, it'll get done this year, because today we have a General Assembly who's working together. We have the Speaker of the House, Mike Madigan, working with John Colton, showing a lot of leadership. I'm working on both sides with Leader Rodonio. That hasn't happened in the last 6 years. You know, we're going through a renaissance in governance in Illinois.
Okay, so give me a prediction. Senator Dillard, I mean, where are we going to go? Are we going to raise the income tax? Are we going to tie it to some other cost cutting or some sort of other reductions?
I predict that the Democrats, and they control everything. In my chamber, they have a veto-proof majority. There will be some type of income tax increase.
Will any Republicans vote for it?
I don't know. It depends on what else is in there, what reforms are in there. When Governor Edgar kept the income tax in 1991 from falling back to 2.5%. In return, he got property tax caps. He set the ground rule, or the ground for Chicago school reform. And he also got welfare reform. He eliminated what was called general assistance. So he got a lot of things in return for it. But you hit it on the head. I mean, Lisa Madigan is sort of the unknown variable here. As a Republican, I've watched the Democrats have issues among themselves. They still control everything in Springfield. And if I was Pat Quinn, I'd be looking over my shoulder all the time at both Madigans, especially the Speaker, because that Lisa Madigan undercurrent. Is she going to run against Pat Quinn? Will Speaker Madigan give him a massive income tax increase so that if Lisa's the governor, then she won't have these problems? That's the unknown variable out there.
Well, then let me ask you, what would you two Republicans need in order to agree to the income tax hike? What would you need in return, fiscally?
What I would ask for would never happen. And frankly, you need to be at Springfield. Again, I've been there 2 months, but I served on the DuPage County Board. On the DuPage County Board, part of our rule-making process is you can't start a new program based on a grant unless you have a funding source to back it going forward. Because if the grant goes away, the program goes away. That doesn't work that way in Springfield. Every day, Carol, I sit in committees where routinely $1.5 million for this, $1.5 million for that. There are supplemental appropriations. I usually ask that difficult question, where's this money coming from? And they snicker and they laugh and they kind of shake their head, and you'll hear murmurings, he's from DuPage County. The way they do business in Springfield is, and this is such a respectful group, I have to watch what I say, but it's very inconsistent with what I've gone through as a village elected official and county elected official.
We've had $7 billion of new money come into the state in the last 5 years. So $7 billion of new money, and we've increased education funding 50% in the last 6 years. So we are having some new monies come in fact, massive amounts.
But respectfully, I mean, we are a low spending state. And if you look at Illinois, I looked at a study from the Center for Tax and Budget Accountability. For coming here, we rank 42nd in terms of state spending. We're a low tax state by any standard. Of the states who have an income tax, we're one of the lowest at 3%. You know, so it's not like, and with all deference to my colleague, a lot of the bills that we talk about end up buried in subcommittee, and people have a conversation about them, and you know, it's like, look, this is something I'd like to see happen, but we know there's no money for it. So, you know, I just want to point out that we've got some real problems, but it's not like, you know, we're drunken sailors down there, or that Illinois has been on a spending spurt.
Let me get to Senator Sandoval. You may end up with the last word on this, Senator, but you talked about capital. Where's the money going to come from capital? If the state income tax, even if it's hiked, only produces about $4 billion and we're $11 billion in the hole maybe, how do we build a bridge or how do we build a road? What money will do that for us?
Well, we in the Illinois Senate are proposing an increase in motor fuel tax to build roads, bridges, and vertical construction. Schools, we need to build schools in Chicago. We need to take care of mass transit. We need to be ready for the Olympics. We need to take care of our neighborhoods, our parks, our police stations, our fire stations. We believe that a motor fuel tax is the route to go.
The governor's against it.
I think it's on the table. I think there are a lot of us who may not be for his personal income tax hike. So we're going to work with him
and
over the next...
And if you're a Democrat, that means, is he in trouble with some of the Democrats?
I think he's a lot of convincing over the next couple of weeks. We're going to sit down with him, and we're going to challenge him also. We believe that the motor fuel tax... Why should people who don't use roads and bridges have to pay for roads and bridges in Illinois?
That will be something that's going to have to be answered on another program. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
Will Burns and Martin Sandoval, Mike Conley, Kirk Dillard, have a good trip to Springfield. We'll be watching you.
Thank you so much.
Chris Crydell, I know I can say that, will be here with the latest business headlines in a moment.